The air in the apartment was a stagnant slurry of ozone, burnt solder, and the bitter, thin scent of coffee that had gone cold 6 hours ago. Elias Thorne did not breathe it so much as he tolerated its presence, his lungs moving with a shallow, mechanical precision that mirrored the work laid out on the velvet mat before him. He sat in a pool of harsh white LED light, the only illumination in a room that seemed to have surrendered its corners to the encroaching shadows of Neo-London's industrial district. Outside, the rain was a rhythmic assault against the reinforced glass, a percussive reminder of a world that refused to be calculated. Between his fingers, trembling with a frequency so minute it was invisible to the naked eye, lay a 1950s Patek Philippe. It was a relic of a time when time itself was linear, gear-driven, and predictable. But this particular watch was a ghost. It was missing its regulator, the tiny, crucial lever that allowed a watchmaker to adjust the speed of the balance wheel. Without it, the watch was a runaway engine of entropy. It didn't keep time, it bled it. Elias adjusted his loop, the world through the lens exploding into a landscape of brass canyons and steel precipices. To anyone else, the watch was a broken antique. To Elias, it was a mathematical insult. He had spent the last 3 nights attempting to find the 0 point, the exact tension of the hairspring that would compensate for the missing regulator. If he could find it, he could prove that perfection was possible even in a system designed for failure. 98.4%, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. He wasn't talking about the watch's accuracy. He was talking about the probability that his next adjustment would snap the spring. He used a pair of anti-magnetic tweezers to nudge the hairspring a fraction of a micron. In his mind, the physics of the movement manifested as a geometric overlay. He didn't just see the metal, he saw the vectors of force, the gravitational pull of the Earth acting upon the escapement, the microscopic friction of the synthetic rubies. His grief over his sister, Clara, often felt like this, a constant, heavy mass that shifted the center of his gravity, making every movement a struggle against a collapse he couldn't quite predict. Tick, 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 tick. The rhythm was wrong. It was a syncopated heartbeat, a stutter in the universe's pulse. Elias felt the familiar tightening in his chest, a sensation he categorized as quantum instability. His perfectionism wasn't a choice, it was a survival mechanism. If he could fix the watch, he could fix the error that had killed Clara. If the math added up here, maybe the universe wasn't just a series of tragic, random collisions. He reached for a microscrew, a speck of silver barely larger than a grain of dust. As the tweezers closed, a low-frequency thrum vibrated through the floorboards, the distant, bone-deep hum of the spire's cooling fans, miles away but omnipresent. The tweezers slipped. The screw didn't just fall. It vanished. Elias froze. His heart rate spiked to 110 beats per minute. The world around him began to blur, the edges of the room fraying into streaks of gray and charcoal as his brain initiated a calculation loop. This was the legacy of the void pulse, the ability, or perhaps the curse, to simulate the immediate future with terrifying clarity. Simulation 1, the screw bounced off the velvet, hit the edge of the mahogany desk, and fell into the heating vent. Retrieval probability, 0.02%. Simulation 2, the screw caught in the cuff of his sleeve. It will fall out when he stands up, landing in the shag rug. Retrieval probability, 14.5%. Simulation 3, the screw entered a suborbital trajectory, deflected by the static charge of the loop, and is currently resting behind the leg of the workbench. Retrieval probability, 62.1%. He didn't move. He couldn't. He was a statue of meat and bone, trapped in the 37.9% of uncertainty. The entropy tax of his own mind began to take its toll. He saw a ghost echo of the screw, a glowing blue trail of its path, but it split into a dozen different directions. His vision swam with the ghost echoes of failed timelines. In one, he saw himself screaming. In another, he saw himself sweeping the entire workbench on the floor in a fit of rage. Calculate, he hissed, his knuckles turning white. Find the 100%. But there was no 100%. The universe was a messy, entropy bitch that hated certainty. Suddenly, the darkness of the apartment was shattered. A brilliant, flickering azure light erupted from the center of the room. It was the holographic projector, triggered by an emergency override signal. Elias gasped, the calculation loop breaking like a shattered mirror. The sensory shock was violent. The smell of ozone intensified, tasting like copper pennies on the back of his tongue. The image that formed in the air was chaotic, a news feed from the Neo-London consensus. Breaking news from the West End, a synthetic voice announced, its tone a chillingly calm monotone that Silas Vane would have admired. A targeted tactical strike has been confirmed at the estate of Arthur Thorne. Elias's breath hitched. Arthur, the grandfather who had gone silent after the accident, the man who had traded his family for the pursuit of quantum weaving. The former chief physicist continued the news anchor. A grainy, high-angle image appeared, a sprawling study with a shattered skylight. In the center of the room, amidst a sea of floating papers and flickering energy arcs, lay a body. Even through the low-resolution projection, Elias recognized the silver hair and the stubborn set of the jaw. Arthur Thorne was dead. But it wasn't the image of the body that stopped Elias's heart. It was what was happening around the body. The air in the hologram was rippling, a visual distortion that looked like heat rising from asphalt. It was a signature Elias knew from his nightmares, a localized temporal collapse. The consensus has labeled the event a technological malfunction. Those sources within Vane Corp suggest a coordinated assassination by Aethertech insurgents. Elias didn't hear the rest. A secondary shock hit him, a physical one. A sharp, rhythmic vibration began to emanate from the front door of his apartment. It wasn't a knock, it was a frequency. A high-pitched, melodic hum that resonated in his teeth, a sound he hadn't heard since he was 6 years old, sitting on Arthur's lap in the Albine Labs. It was the Thorne frequency. He turned toward the door, his eyes wide. On the floor, sliding through the mail slot with a metallic clink, was a small, heavy package wrapped in lead-lined foil. It didn't just sit there, it vibrated, the foil crinkling as if something inside was trying to breathe. His grandfather was dead, and within seconds, a piece of his legacy had arrived at Elias's door. This was the call to action his math had never predicted. Elias looked from the package back to the broken watch on his desk. The missing regulator, the missing certainty. His mind, already strained by the previous loop, began to spiral again. This time, the stakes weren't a missing screw. They were existential. He saw the door being kicked in by men in monochromatic white armor, the hounds. He saw himself picking up the package and the apartment exploding. He saw himself running into the rain and being gunned down on the sidewalk. Simulation 1402. Open the package. Success rate of survival, 12%. Simulation 1403. Leave it. Success rate, 4%. Simulation 1404. Throw it out the window. Success rate, 0.001%. The calculation loop intensified, the blue ghost echoes of his own hand reaching for the package, multiplying until the room was filled with 1,000 versions of Elias Thorne, all frozen in a state of terminal indecision. The sensory overload was a physical weight, a gravitational pull that threatened to crush his skull. I need the regulator, he wheezed, his hand twitching toward the watch. But the watch was silent. The news anchor's voice faded into a digital hiss. The only thing left was the hum of the package, a siren song of quantum intent that demanded an answer Elias wasn't prepared to give. Arthur, he whispered, a single tear tracking through the metallic dust on his cheek. What have you done? In the spire, miles away, Silas Vane watched the same news feed, his eyes reflecting the sterile white glow of his office. He didn't need a calculation loop. He had an AI that had already predicted Elias's reaction with 99.9% accuracy. The glitch is active, he murmured to the shadow standing by the door. Send the hounds. I want the drive, and I want the boy before he learns how to weave. Back in the apartment, Elias finally moved. Not because he had found the 100% path, but because the vibration of the package had reached a crescendo that shattered the glass of his workbench. The 1950s Patek Philippe fell into the darkness, its gears finally, mercifully, still. Elias reached for the package, his fingers brushing the cold, vibrating lead. Probability of success, unknown. He tore the foil,